Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a vast, primeval forest at dusk. The trees are not just plants. They are ancient, sentient beings that have stood there since before your ancestors drew their first breath. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and the sound of your own heartbeat. You feel a profound sense of dread, yes, but it is mixed with something else, a terrifying sense of recognition. You feel as though the forest knows you, and that in some way you cannot explain, you have been here before. Not in this life, but in a life you never lived. You are not just afraid of the dark. You are afraid of what the dark might awaken in you. This is the psychological landscape of Carl Jung's greatest discovery, the collective unconscious. It is not a theory confined to textbooks or the ramblings of a reclusive Swiss psychiatrist. It is the hidden architecture of your soul, the silent scriptwriter of your deepest fears, your most irrational passions, and the very myths you live by. You think your mind is a blank slate at birth, a private vessel for your personal memories and experiences? Jung's work is the seismic shock that shatters that comfortable illusion. He argues that you are born with a mind that is already ancient, preloaded with a psychic inheritance millions of years old. Here is the central paradox that will haunt you long after you turn the final page. You believe you are the author of your own life. You believe your thoughts are your own, your feelings are uniquely yours, and your dreams are the random noise of a sleeping brain. But what if the person you call is merely a fragile raft floating on an ocean of psychic life that belongs to the entire human species? What if the hero you admire, the villain you despise, and the savior you wait for are not just characters in stories, but living structural elements of your own psyche, waiting to be activated? Jung presents a terrifyingly beautiful question. Are you living your life, or is something else living through you? Are your choices truly your own, or are you merely acting out a script written in the collective dreams of your ancestors? You felt it, haven't you? That sudden surge of irrational rage that felt bigger than the moment. That unexplainable pull toward a person or a place. That dream that felt more real than reality itself, leaving you with a lingering sense of cosmic significance you couldn't put into words. These are not glitches in your mental software. These are doorways. This book, The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, is not a text you read. It is a map you descend into. It is an invitation to journey downward, past the shallow waters of your personal memories, into the deep, churning abyss where gods and demons are not supernatural entities, but fundamental patterns of your own being. It promises to hand you the key to that locked door in your own mind, the one you've always been too afraid to open. But the key comes with a warning. What you find on the other side will change everything. It will force you to ask the most unsettling question of all. If my psyche is not entirely my own, then who or what am I? If this revelation already stirs something deep within you, hit subscribe now, because what comes next will take you even further into the hidden architecture of your own psyche. You have been cut off from your own roots. This is Jung's diagnosis, and it is merciless in its precision. Modern consciousness, the voice you call you right now, sitting at this screen, is not the pinnacle of human evolution. It is a thin, fragile crust floating on a volcanic core. You have been taught to identify only with this crust. Your personal ambitions, your resume, your rational thoughts, your unique childhood memories. You have been trained to believe that everything else, the myths, the symbols, the gods, belongs to the past, to primitive peoples, to superstition. You have been educated out of your own depths. Jung calls this condition the hypertrophy of consciousness. It is a swelling of the ego, a belief that the conscious mind is the master of the psychic house. But here is the hidden problem. The unconscious does not disappear just because you ignore it. It does not sit quietly in the basement, waiting for your permission to speak. Instead, it speaks through you, whether you listen or not. It speaks through your irrational moods that sabotage your relationships, It speaks through your unexplained attractions and repulsions. It speaks through the projections you cast onto others, seeing in them the qualities you refuse to see in yourself. You think you are rational? You think you are in control? Jung would smile gently and ask you to examine your last emotional outburst, your last obsession, your last dream that left you shaken for days. The root cause is a catastrophic severance. Over the past few centuries, the Western mind has worshipped at the altar of reason, science, and individualism. We have dissected the world into atoms and algorithms, and in doing so, we have dissected ourselves. We have lost the language of the symbolic, the mythic, the instinctual. We have forgotten that for tens of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in profound participation with forces they called gods, spirits, and demons, forces that were not external superstitions, but psychological realities projected onto the cosmos. When we stopped believing in them, we did not destroy them. We simply disowned them. And now, these disowned powers live on, unacknowledged and uncontrollable, in the depths of every modern psyche. This is the hidden wound Jung exposes. You are living in a house haunted by ancestors you refuse to acknowledge. You are trying to navigate life with only a flashlight when you could be drawing on the light of 1,000 suns. The consequences of this severance are not abstract. They are the emptiness you feel despite your achievements. They are the midlife crisis that descends without warning. They are the ideologies that possess you, the leaders you idolize, the enemies you demonize. When you lose contact with the archetypal patterns that structure human experience, you do not become free. You become prey. You become vulnerable to possession by any passing force that promises to fill the void. Jung's diagnosis is this: you are sick with forgetting. And the sickness is spreading. You are living inside a myth you do not recognize as a myth. This is the unseen consequence of your severance from the collective unconscious. You believe you are free of ancient stories, but you are merely unconscious of which story is currently living through you. The gods did not disappear. They changed their names. They now wear the masks of politics, consumerism, technology, and ideology. And because you cannot see them for what they are, they wield absolute power over your life. Look at the world around you. Look at the crowds gathering under flags, possessed by a collective fervor that makes individuals do things they would never do alone. Look at the fanaticism, the scapegoating, the righteous rage. Jung would recognize this immediately. These are not political movements. These are archetypal possessions. When the archetype of the hero becomes unconscious, you do not simply admire a leader. You merge with the crowd and project all your power onto a single figure, waiting to be saved. When the archetype of the shadow remains unexamined, you do not simply disagree with your opponent. You see them as pure evil, the embodiment of everything you hate, and you feel justified in their destruction. This is the consequence playing out on the global stage. A world unconsciously enacting ancient dramas while believing itself to be modern and rational. Wars are fought not over resources alone, but over unconscious projections of the shadow. Relationships crumble not because of incompatibility, but because partners unknowingly project their inner mother or father onto each other, demanding that a mere human fulfill a divine role. You have felt this, have you not? That crushing disappointment when someone you idealized revealed their feet of clay? That was not just disillusionment. That was an archetype withdrawing its projection, leaving you alone with a human being. And it gets deeper. The consequence reaches into your psyche and steals your vitality. When you are cut off from the archetypes, you are cut off from the fundamental energies that have driven human creativity, meaning, and purpose for millennia. Artists do not create from personal experience alone. They tap into the collective wellspring. Lovers do not feel romance through individual choice alone. They are swept up by the archetype of Eros. Spiritual seekers do not encounter the divine through theology alone. They meet the self, the archetype of wholeness. But you, in your severed state, experience these forces as alien, as coming from outside. You chase love, success, and meaning as if they were objects to be acquired, not realizations of your own deepest structure. The stakes could not be higher. Jung warns that the unconscious ignored does not remain passive. It accumulates energy, it swells, and eventually it erupts. The 20th century saw such eruptions in the form of world wars and totalitarian regimes, collective madness on an unimaginable scale. Jung believed these were not merely political events. They were psychological epidemics. The collective unconscious, denied conscious expression, expressed itself through destruction. The question he leaves hanging is whether you will wait for the eruption in your own life, the breakdown, the possession, the crisis, or whether you will descend now voluntarily to meet what waits in the dark. If you're brave enough to face what lives in your own depths, smash that like button and drop a comment. Have you ever felt possessed by something you couldn't explain? I read every single response. The descent must be made voluntarily. This is Jung's prescription, and it is the most courageous act a human being can undertake. You cannot continue living as a fragment, a floating island of consciousness, pretending the depths do not exist. The path to resolution is not to destroy the ego or to be swallowed by the unconscious. It is to establish a living dialogue between the two. Jung calls this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, not who you are told to be, and not who your unconscious forces would make you. But how does one begin such a descent? Jung's answer is both simple and terrifying. You must meet your shadow. Before you can access the great archetypes of the collective unconscious, you must first clean the threshold of your personal unconscious. The shadow is everything you have rejected in yourself. The weaknesses, the shameful desires, the aggressive impulses, the traits your parents punished and your culture condemned. You do not need to seek it out. It appears in your life constantly, projected onto others. Everyone who irritates you, everyone you judge, everyone you secretly envy is holding a piece of your shadow for you to reclaim. This is the first counterintuitive move. Instead of condemning your shadow, you must befriend it. Jung writes that everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes. You cannot become whole by pretending to be only light. The saint must acknowledge the sinner within, or the sinner will act out unconsciously, sabotaging every noble intention. This is why the most righteous people often commit the most terrible acts. They have projected their darkness so completely that they believe themselves incapable of evil, and therefore never guard against it. Once you have begun this reconciliation, the deeper work can start. You must pay attention to your dreams, not as random nonsense, but as letters from the unconscious, written in the universal language of symbol and myth. You must notice the recurring themes in your life, the patterns that seem to repeat across relationships and situations. You must ask yourself, what myth am I living? The hero, the martyr, the wanderer? And you must be willing to let that myth die if it no longer serves your growth. Jung offers a radical reframing. The goal is not happiness, but wholeness. The archetypes are not problems to be solved, but presences to be encountered. The path is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming complete. This means embracing the paradoxes within you, the masculine and feminine, the light and dark, the spiritual and instinctual. It means withdrawing projections and owning your own power. It means descending into the cave you have feared, not to be devoured, but to discover that the monster you expected is actually a part of yourself, waiting to be integrated. The prescription is clear. Stop running, turn around, face the darkness, and begin the conversation. You are not one, but many. This is the revelation that awaits you at the bottom of the descent, the book's ultimate truth that shatters the illusion of the singular self. Jung's final synthesis is that the psyche is naturally a multiplicity. What you call I is not a solo performer, but the conductor of an orchestra, and the musicians are the archetypes. The mother, the father, the child, the hero, the wise old man, the trickster, the anima, the animus, they all live within you, waiting for their turn to play. The goal is not to silence them, but to learn to conduct them in harmony. This insight rewrites everything. Your life is not a linear progression from birth to death, but a mythic drama unfolding on multiple levels simultaneously. The crises you face are not merely personal failures or bad luck. They are archetypal initiations. The loss that shatters you is the death-rebirth archetype, demanding you let go of an old identity. The attraction that consumes you is the anima or animus calling you toward wholeness through relationship. The dream that haunts you is the self, the archetype of divinity within, trying to guide you toward your true purpose. Jung's most profound revelation concerns this self. It is not the ego. The ego is the center of consciousness, but the self is the center of the total psyche, including the unconscious. The self is the image of God within you, the blueprint of your wholeness, the destination toward which individuation moves. When you encounter the self in dreams and symbols, in moments of transcendent meaning, you encounter something greater than your personal history. You encounter the divine ground of your being, and this encounter changes everything. You no longer live as an isolated ego fighting against the universe. You live as a participant in something vast and meaningful. The archetypes are no longer forces that possess you from without. They become energies you can consciously relate to. The shadow becomes a source of strength and creativity. The anima or animus becomes a bridge to your own depths. The self becomes the compass that orients your entire life. You are no longer a fragment. You are becoming whole. But Jung offers no comforting finality. Individuation is not a destination, but a direction. It is a lifelong conversation with the unconscious, a continuous process of integration that ends only with death. The archetypes will always be greater than your comprehension. The collective unconscious will always remain partly mysterious, and this is as it should be. You are not meant to master the depths, but to relate to them, to honor them, to learn from them. The book closes with a final poetic image. The psyche as a vast ocean, with consciousness as a light dancing on the waves. You thought the light was everything. Now you know the ocean is everything too, and the light is only possible because of the depths it illuminates. You are both the light and the ocean. You are the personal and the collective. You are the temporal and the eternal. The question was never who you are. The question is, how deeply are you willing to dive? The archetypes await your descent. The unconscious waits for your acknowledgement. And the self waits for your return, not as the person who began the journey, but as someone far more ancient, far more complete, and finally, at home in the vastness of your own soul.